Hi, my name is Sultan Abdullah, and I'm going to be presenting with Janiyah Jackson. When you think of a person in power involved in legal activities, who comes to mind? Hold that thought. Can you imagine a president involved in a cover-up? Not a simple cover-up, but a cover-up that will spark a scandal, one of the biggest scandals in the United States. That scandal we're going to be talking about today is Watergate. Man, it's important to talk about things like this because throughout history, you always want to learn from your mistakes. And learning the history of how the biggest scandal, one of the biggest scandals in American politics, which shaped how the government works and all that, is important. So going forward today, we're going to be talking about three things. We're going to be talking about what is Watergate, the investigation into Watergate, and media coverage and Nixon's resignation. All right. Okay, let's jump out the gate. What is Watergate? Watergate was a political scandal. If you don't know, now you know. A political scandal that happened in 1972. It involved a break-in at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. The break-in was at the Democratic National Committee. This, as you already know, involved President Nixon. Now, you're wondering, why was President Nixon involved in this break-in? I'll explain more on the next slide. 5 men were arrested during this break-in. They targeted the Democratic Party's offices. They attempted to wiretap the phones and carry suspicious equipment. Oh my gosh. Though at first, people didn't think much of the break-in, thought it was a regular burglary, the investigation that will follow proved there was more than meets the eye. All right. During the investigation, journalists actually exposed hidden details. Reporters Bobby Woodward and Carl Benstein reported the story. The FBI investigated those connections, and Senate held public hearings, and the White House released secret tapes. All these tapes showed involvement by the Nixon party, by Nixon and his party, as they were trying to push for a re-election effort. What these investigations showed were Nixon and his party offering hush money, Nixon and his party being connected with these 5 burglars. And so, with that, I leave it to Janiyah to talk about Nixon and his resignation. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Sultan. So after the break-in, things didn't just stop there. What really makes the Watergate scandal so important was the investigation that took place. At first, the break-in seemed like a small crime, but journalists began to dig deeper. 2 reporters from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, played a huge role in uncovering the truth. They followed leads, interviewed sources, and slowly revealed that the break-in was connected to people working for President Richard Nixon. As more information came out, the FBI and the Senate also started investigating. There were televised hearings where the government officials had to answer questions in front of the public. This made the situation even more serious because now millions of Americans were watching what was happening. One of the biggest turning points in the investigation was the discovery of the secret recordings. It turned out that Nixon had a system in the White House that recorded conversations. These tapes became extremely important because they could prove whether or not he was involved in the cover-up. At first, Nixon refused to hand over the tapes. He claimed executive privilege, meaning he had the right to keep them private. But the case eventually went to the Supreme Court, and the court ruled that he had to release them. When the tapes were finally revealed, they showed that Nixon had tried to cover up the break-in. He had been involved in efforts to stop the investigation and protect those responsible. This is a huge moment because it clearly showed abuse of power. Because of this evidence, Nixon lost support from the public and other government leaders. Many people in Congress were preparing to remove him from the office through impeachment. Instead of going through the process, Nixon made the decision to resign. In conclusion, the Watergate scandal had a major impact on the United States and its government. It started with a break-in and quickly turned to something much bigger. The investigation revealed corruption at its highest level of government, including actions taken by the president himself. One of the most important outcomes was that Richard Nixon became the first president in the United States to ever resign from office. This showed that no one is above the law, not even the president. The scandal also led to changes in how the government operates. New laws and new rules were created to increase transparency and prevent abuse of power in the government. Thanks to this scandal, Nixon ended up resigning in 1974. He became the first president to resign. Many officials went to prison due to the scandal. Vice President Ford became the president, and the public trust in the government decreased. And so forth. Finally, the Watergate has a lasting effect on the American people. As stated, it caused many citizens to lose their trust in the government, and that impact still remains today. Overall, the Watergate scandal is important because it teaches us about accountability, the importance of free press, and the need of honesty in leadership. Thank you for listening.